Curated by VIBEZ Church to help you practice the way of Jesus and be all that God has called you to be. You have joined us for our year-long series titled Devoted. Acts 2:42 tells us that the followers of Jesus were devoted to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to breaking of bread, and to prayer. This podcast was created to provide context and commentary for what you read each day. Just before our friends begin discussing today's reading, we want to invite you not only for fellowship, but for prayer as well. We have created the VIBEZ Daily chat group to offer you fellowship and a community where you can state your observations, ask questions about the reading or the podcast. You can join us by downloading the VIBEZ Church app in your favorite app store. Click Join the Conversation and join us today. And finally, we hope that you can join us for prayer. Prayer happens Monday through Friday, and more information on that can be found on the VIBEZ Church app under prayer. Now, let's begin our conversation on today's reading.
Hello, welcome back to the VIBEZ Daily podcast. We are on day 116. We are on day 116, y'all. We made it. We're going through First Chronicles. This week, we started chapter 1. We are now at chapter 9. So,
finally get a little bit less
genealogy. Some more like history again. And so I'm with my friend Shay. And we're just going to try and dig back into these chapters. So let's just hit it. Chapter 9. Chapter 9, we have the return of the exile. So lately it's just been like genealogy from like Adam, then like every tribe until the exile. And so now we have the genealogy of the returned exiles that have come back from Babylon. So yeah, talk to me.
So yes, they have obviously returned. And I was reading a few things, and it talked about how this had been a full 70 years. Them coming back to their land probably gave them, and their jobs probably gave them some sense of renewed purpose. Like, this is where I'm meant to be. This is where God has ordained me to be.
Yeah.
So I can't even imagine what that probably felt like.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like, some hope, right? Mm-hmm. It was so interesting that when I was actually, because, you know, with all these genealogies, I said, somebody need to help me with this. So I went to the Bible Project, I was just trying to listen in. And, like, some of the things that he was saying, though, was, like, even whoever wrote this book of Chronicles was, like, giving people hope who had returned from the exile, because it seems like they had come back, like you said, been established in their households, and now there's all these great prophecies of, like, the Messiah, and it's kind of like, well, what now? Like, and so they were, like, given this hope, and they were restored, and they were like, okay, Lord, like, when are the promises coming, right? When are these next set of promises coming? And it felt like this book of Chronicles was meant to, like, show them this is where you came from, and this is where you are, and, like, these are the prophecies that are still to be fulfilled. Like, tracking and tracing all of that, just to give them reminders and, like, give them hope, like, the Lord's been with you and he's still with you. And so that is sweet to just have them come back, settle into their houses and their homes and their jobs like the Lord said he would do, right?
I don't know, it's just so sweet.
It is.
It's so sweet. That God would do that, or even just allow them to be back in the land that he appointed to them.
Yeah.
And also just the fact that he didn't leave them.
Yeah.
Like, he's back here dwelling with his people.
Yeah. And the Levites, he said, were the first to come back. It looks like in verse 2, it says, now the first to dwell again in their possessions in their cities were Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the temple servants. And so it's like the people, he brought his people back first, right? To get the temple together and reestablish God there, right?
Before all the rest of the people started showing
Yes, before. Exactly. And so it was kind of like, okay, let's reestablish, like you said, him being God, being there, dwelling with his people. Which he didn't have to do.
He didn't. They could have still been in Babylon.
Yeah, because they was cutting up. They was cutting up.
Probably will again.
You know it. But even since I was looking at these numbers briefly, like before we were looking at thousands, now we're looking at hundreds. You know, it seems like they just dwindled. You know,
They did.
Yeah, the Lord has stripped them down. That's talk about humility, right? Yeah.
So this year, friend Phineas mentioned again.
Yeah. Yeah, the priest Phineas. Listen. Yeah. So this is this is good because, like you said, we mentioned yesterday, like some of the assignments that we saw. So here we go again. We see gatekeepers for the Levites and which was important.
And all four sides were covered.
Which was like this was a threat. Like they really had to like make sure the temple was protected because, as you'll see in some of the other books when we get to them, I mean, it said Chronicles is normally after these books. So we should have already probably read this to make it more sense. But in some of the other books, you talk about some of the hostility that the Israelites ran into when they came back, with like people trying to tear down the walls, people trying to keep them from rebuilding the temple. And so it was like I remember one of these verses was like they had a sword in a hand and a brick in another, like building. Like it was real hostile. So like you said, like even just the roles of these gatekeepers and these people was like real serious back here.
Yeah, because even verse 27 says they lay and lodged around the house of God, for on them lay the duty of watching, and they had charge of opening it every morning.
Yeah, because I mean the temple was a threat to nations around. It was like, we done seen what happens when they thriving with this temple.
We saw what your God can do.
Yeah, so they was not having it. So you're right, they were about it. But I do love the fervor and like the excitement for them to like get back to their temple and like to build it up and to reestablish it. So yeah. And then again we see these singers in verse 33. We see the singers because the Lord needs worship. So
I also, the verses leading up to 33 talk about just like these small jobs that there's nothing that's insignificant within the temple. People handling utensils, and
silverware,
making cakes, craftsmen. So all of it had an importance.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed that too. I was like, how much work has to be put in with some silverware? Like, but it must have been.
It was important.
It must have been important.
It's important to God.
And it must have been a lot of work to do these dishes. Like, it must have been a lot of work to make sure everything was in order. Because you know the Lord had an order about everything. So, yeah. And here we go with another genealogy of Saul of sorts between verses 35 and 44.
Again, I don't understand.
Yeah, the inserts are kind of random here. Because I thought we were talking about these exiles that return.
Coming back. Yeah. And now, I guess it kind of leads because the next chapter is talking about his death.
Yeah.
We already talked about him.
Yeah. So like I said, it's interesting that this chapter didn't start, this person who crafted this Bible didn't start the chapter previously to include this part. But yeah, so yeah, let's move out these genealogies. Let's move on to the let's move on to more of the historical accounts here that we have of what is it called? The narratives.
Yes.
Of the Bible.
I love the narrative.
That's where I thrive. Okay. So
and
yeah,
I can remember details.
Yeah, I remember a good story. I can't remember names, dates and names. Help me. So chapter 10, you said we go back to Saul, and it's like the end of Saul. So it's like the end of Saul, and then chapter 11 goes into the beginning of David and his rule and reign. So what do we see here?
I know there's a whole lot of words before we get to what kind of stuck out to me. But in verse 13 and 14, just when we read this story previously, it wasn't as specific or kind of broke it down the way this does. So it says that Saul died from his breach of faith.
Yes.
He broke faith with the Lord in that he did not keep the commandments of the Lord, and also consulted a medium seeking guidance. So when we read the life of Saul, we see all of that, but to like hear it condensed into those words, it's like, yeah, he did some deeds.
He did. Can you go on? Keep reading to 14. Can you read 14 verses?
He did not seek guidance from the Lord. Therefore, the Lord put him to death and turned the kingdom over to David, the son of Jesse.
Boom. In the chapter.
And that's it.
And that's it. That's all.
Like all these mentions of Saul, only to sum it down to he did some bad things in God's eyes and he killed him.
Yeah. It seems like this writer was real black and white. First of all, I'm not even going to give you, Saul, more than just your death battle. Okay?
That's it.
I'm not going to give you any more time than just when you died. When you died, how you died, and why you died. You know, like, so, yeah. Breach of faith. That one was clear.
Breach of faith.
Crystal clear.
It's like poured after the gods. It's also another gut punch from Chronicles. Like, the way he words some things.
Yeah.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And he said the stories are very similar to what we've read before in the Kings and in 1 Samuel. And like you said, here we go. We pick up in chapter 11 now, our last chapter. Do you have anything else for 10 though before we move on?
Nope.
Yeah, okay. So here we are in our last chapter, chapter 11. And what is interesting in the Bible recap, or not Bible recap, Bible project, they mentioned here is that in this mentioning of David, he was saying how like David is kind of like elevated and is only shown in a positive light, and they don't show like or talk about any of his downfalls here. Like,
I have heard that too. They're like Chronicles is gonna omit some stuff, and make him look a little different.
Yeah. So here we are with King David being exalted, Almighty be, without Bathsheba and some of the other stuff that happens. So chapter 11.
The full totality of him.
Yeah, exactly. So what do we see here?
So I believe it's chapter 5. The inhabitants of Jabez said to David, "You will not come in here." Nevertheless, David took the stronghold of Zion. What that is, the city of David. Like, it was like a short little flex sentence. Like, you're not coming in here, but he got it.
Yeah. That verse 5 is deep. It is. And we do see here again, like he said, whoever strikes the Jebusites first shall be chief and commander. And that's how we see Joab, his nephew, who goes up first and becomes chief. The son of Zariah, who we mentioned in the first day of this week? Or, well, we mentioned that we noticed that, like, this Zariah is actually David's sister. Boom. There we go. So, yeah. So, here he is, and this is the beginning. He said the beginning of his reign. Started out beastie. Always been beastie. And now he's taking over this. Now, I think in the Kings, or I'm sorry, in Samuel's, they kind of like went into more detail, because remember they were talking about how like they went through like the water shaft or something.
Oh yes.
It was something like yeah. I hope that's the right story. I'm not mixing stories here, but yeah, but it's interesting. And then we go into his mighty men, which we've seen before.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
But they, like, one of them has a name, but they don't have names.
Yeah.
Or they don't mention the names of these mighty men.
Yeah.
It's just like, they were great and they did these great things. We don't know who they are or who they're related to or who they're descendants of.
Right. Because even when they mention them back in like the Kings, and it kind of gives David's mighty, I think it's the Kings that gives David's mighty men and stuff, or maybe it was Samuel. I'm mixing these books up now. It's been a lot, y'all. Help you grow out. But they give like the names, but like you said, no genealogy with that. And so it's interesting that, like, here, you said you would think in Chronicles, yeah,
or details.
Or maybe I missed them in all the names before. Yeah.
There was a lot. So it could have been overlooked, but I just don't think it mentions them.
Yeah.
Their names.
Yeah, exactly. Because these are warriors, not heads of households here. So, yeah. So here we go. These mighty men. I love them, though. Eric knows I love hearing about these gangster warriors. Because they were just a different breed. Like, it's what all of our, like, Marvel movies and all of our John Wick is trying to be these days. Like,
I don't know if it's in this chapter, but when it talks about how, like, they were good with their right and left hand.
Yes.
They were ambidextrous and out here slaying people.
They sure were. And those, like, the Benjaminites too, like, they were like that. And the Gadites too, they were good with their right and lefts too. But yeah, so here we go. We kind of the same accounts. You know, we have what's his name? The 3 of the 30, right? The chief men, and we see some of the same stories here of Abishai, the brother of Joab, who was chief of the 30, who wielded his spear against 300 men. That's in verse 20. The same story of, like, David being thirsty and wanting to drink, and they broke through and got him a drink. He's like, "No, I'm not gonna drink in it." Yeah, so some of the same stories that we have seen now again.
One interesting thing is just the number 3 is over and over.
Yes.
Like, he was up against 300 men. There were 3 men, like 3 mighty men. There was another set of 30. Just like, why?
Yeah.
Are we using the same multiple of 30?
Yeah, and I'm so curious of how you struck down 300 men. Like, are we counting along the way? Like,
or is that y'all just,
we just like 1,
add a little more,
2, 3, 4. Like, what are we, like, who's counting? Maybe the armor bearers. Maybe the armor bearers are keeping track. I don't know how we're counting all these people. So, I don't. It's interesting though, but they got record, and the stories are the same. Benaiah, my boy, who goes down to the pit with the snowy lion, or goes into a pit on a snowy day with a lion. That's the one.
I said this today at church. I was like, why were there so many lions everywhere?
Lions is everywhere, girl.
What?
They was in the straight wilderness.
How were y'all surviving? Like, how was this clan not eaten?
Yes, exactly. We just dwelling with the lions. But yeah, so mighty men are here, and yeah, I think it's interesting. I think what the extra, because this Benaiah story is a favorite of mine, one of the extra things that got pointed out here that I didn't see before was they said it was like a Egyptian man before that he went up against. In verse 23 here, though, it is the extra detail of, like, this was like a tall guy. Like, this guy was like 7 feet tall. It says 5 cubits here. I think in my CSB he said he was 7 feet tall or something like that. So I was like, oh yeah, this was a big man. Like, this is a big deal. Like, it's a big deal. You went up there with no sword, just your staff, and just took this man's spear out of his hand and killed him with it. And so, yeah.
These people were really walking in the spirit.
Come on, spirit.
I think one of the chapters throughout here was just talking about how God gave David all his favors.
Yeah.
He was with him, but they were, like, really empowered by the spirit.
They were. They really were. And they said, I feel like at this time the Lord gave them what they needed for sure to accomplish what they needed to do. So I kind of retract. So before the first day of this week, I said I just wanted to be in the genealogy. I think I want to be one of the mighty men. Like, I just want can I be on this list? I just want to be in this list. I want to be beastie too. But so chapter 11 is about these mighty men again. And we have, like, the list of names all over again from 26 down to the end of the chapter. We see Uriah the Hittite in verse 41.
Oh,
Or Uriah, because that's the husband of Bathsheba. So he is there, a mighty warrior, and his name does not go lost. He is not lost here in the accounts. And so yeah, so that's that.
That was chapter 11.
Chapter 11. All right, so it's the end of today. You'll catch back up with us tomorrow. We'll finish out this week with chapters 12, 13, and 14. So we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us for the VIBEZ Daily podcast. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or download our favorite, the VIBEZ Church app. Visit vibes.church/devoted for additional episodes, notes, details, and the latest merch. Join us